On this Wednesday night, the risks of reopening schools. Mounting questions from millions of parents and kids.
Masking will probably be more useful with older children.
And the new guidelines that give new meaning to distance learning. Plus, Quebec's new outbreaks as more rules there are about to be relaxed. Defending the way they do business.
We are very, very focused on the customer.
4 tech titans testify before U.S. lawmakers about competition and predatory practices. And a dog's nose knows. Harnessing the power of pooches to detect COVID-19.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. With September fast approaching, there's no doubt the back-to-school experience will be complex and confusing this year. What school will look like, whether kids are fully back in class will depend on where you live and the amount of community transmission of COVID-19. There is some updated guidance on how schools can reopen safely. Doctors from Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital and other Ontario pediatric hospitals recommend smaller class sizes, more teachers, cleaning staff and hygiene facilities, and outdoor education where possible. It is a tricky balance, the risk of infection versus the impact on kids, development, education, and mental health by keeping them at home. As Eric Sorensen reports, it's something governments across this country are struggling with.
It's one of the most contentious debates, how to send kids back to school during a pandemic. In Ontario, some parents protested at MPP's offices, demanding more funding to make schools safe and class sizes smaller.
I'm very interested in making sure my kids, for their mental and physical well-being, get back in school, but only in a very safe way.
A Leger survey finds parents of children remain worried. 59% are prepared to send their kids back to school, but 23% don't know, and 18% plan to keep them home in September. Specialists from Sick Kids and other Ontario hospitals are pushing to reopen schools as fully as possible, with precautions, because there are health and economic consequences from kids not going to school.
The major goal of reopening schools has to be maximizing child and youth health.
In returning to school, the healthcare group is now recommending for elementary students 1 meter distancing. It's almost as effective as 2, they say. And for high schoolers to wear non-medical masks in school when possible because they do more good than harm.
Masking will probably be more useful with older children, especially if social distancing cannot be maintained.
Now, British Columbia has released plans to open schools in September full-time. High school students will be limited to cohorts of 120, elementary and middle school children to learning groups of 60.
And that seems like a lot. That's not all in the same classroom. But it will be segregating by grades so that there's less mingling in the school environment.
BC is the latest to plan for students to return full-time. It joins Alberta, Saskatchewan, Quebec, Atlantic Canada, and the Territories, where the aim is full-time in school for elementary and high school students, with some exceptions. Manitoba and Ontario are still considering full-time or online or a hybrid combination, but with more details expected this week. Meantime, Alberta has just seen a spike in COVID-19 cases, and the potential for more outbreaks worries some educators about opening all the schools all at once.
I don't think it's helpful to have schools closed 100% at the end of August and then the next day in September to be opening up 100%. So I think it's really important that we do a phased approach.
It seems a massive epidemiological experiment is set to begin about 1 month from now, when more than 5 million Canadian youngsters are scheduled to return to school. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The City of Toronto, which reported just 13 new cases today, and the Peel region are moving to Stage 3 of Ontario's reopening plan on Friday. That means playgrounds, community centres and libraries will reopen, as will indoor dining at bars and restaurants. Strict public health restrictions remain in place, though, and masks are mandatory indoors unless you're eating, drinking or exercising. Toronto's mayor says personal responsibility is key to making this work.
We just have to keep doing the right thing as we've been doing, uncomfortable, sometimes inconvenient, or sometimes as complicated as that may be. Keep wearing a mask or face covering as often as you possibly can.
In Quebec, there have been setbacks that have led to some restrictions being reimposed. Of particular concern is a cluster of cases at a day camp on Montreal's South Shore. Some public pools and liquor store outlets have also closed after outbreaks. As Mike Armstrong reports, Quebec is still pushing ahead with an overall plan to ease restrictions.
Public health officials ordered this day camp closed a week ago when it had just a handful of positive COVID-19 cases. In the days since, between staff and children, it's jumped all the way to 27. Marie-Thérèse Dupuis lives next door.
Kids, they touch each other. It might try to transfer from one to the other and then to their parents and the other kids at home.
All children and staff at the facility have been told to quarantine at home. The public health department is ramping up tracing and testing. But there have now been outbreaks at about 15 Quebec day camps, most of them small. The Association of Day Camps says it isn't surprised there have been COVID-19 cases. That was expected, and considering about 1,000 camps have been open for close to 2 months, it says 15 outbreaks isn't terrible. That said, the setbacks are starting to pile up. Pools in one borough of Montreal are shut down this week after 3 positive tests. It turns out about 80% of the borough's lifeguards went to a party together. Quebec also announced Wednesday it's closing 3 provincial liquor stores north of Montreal after 8 employees tested positive. And in Sherbrooke, Quebec, beaches and pools have been closed, and as of Wednesday, 5 members of a ball hockey team tested positive. The Deputy Premier has been pointing fingers at part of the problem.
We need young people, so we are asking them, work with us, help you, and respect the rules.
Right now, Quebec limits public gatherings at 50 people, but that's supposed to go up to 250 Monday. That appears to be going ahead despite the setbacks.
People have to understand that nothing's going to be risk-free moving forward. We have to figure out how to live with this problem until we find effective therapeutics and vaccines. And there are no guarantees in that court either.
The plan is to continue with precautions and vigilance, and as long as fires are being put out as quickly as they can be found, this appears to be the new reality. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Boucherville, Quebec.
There's been another big jump in infections in Saskatchewan. The province says 50 more people have tested positive. 44 of them are from a single Hutterite colony. According to Premier Scott Moe, Hutterites now account for 76% of Saskatchewan's 322 active cases. And today he issued a direct message to those communities.
Every single one of us in this province has been asked to, and the vast majority have changed how we are living each and every day. You all need to as well. If you don't, many will get sick in your community. Some will get very sick. Some will die.
In the coming days, Moe says officials will be visiting every Hutterite colony in Saskatchewan to ensure public health orders are being obeyed. The situation is still getting worse in many parts of the United States. More than 150,000 Americans have now died from COVID-19, and there's no slowdown in sight. The White House Coronavirus Task Force now classifies 21 states as being in the so-called red zone. That means they have high levels of infection and positive tests. As Jackson Proskow reports, there's still no national plan to try to bring the virus under control.
The uncontrolled spread of COVID-19 is delivering deadly consequences across the U.S.
ICUs, they're all full. We are finding ways to MacGyver things, running out of supplies.
For the second day in a row, Florida recorded a record number of deaths, more than 200. California shattered its one-day record for fatalities. Texas reported more than 8,000 new cases. More and more states are on the verge of becoming hotspots, tipping into territory that will bring the certainty of more death.
We do still need a national strategy, and many of us in the public health and health professional sphere have been asking for it. But candidly, 6 months into this in the United States, I'm not expecting anything, and that's unfortunate.
As the virus spreads, the bitter partisan divide over the pandemic grows worse. In Washington, Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert tested positive for COVID-19 less than 24 hours after attending a hearing with the U.S. Attorney General. Gohmert has often refused to wear a mask and seemed to blame face coverings for his diagnosis.
When I have a mask on, I'm moving it to make it comfortable, and I can't help but wonder if that puts some germs in the mask.
The science on masks, testing, and prevention remains clear. That has not been enough to change the course of decision-making in the U.S. President Donald Trump has returned to pushing conspiracy theories about the virus, promoting the word of a doctor who has claimed there's a cure for COVID-19 and who believes alien DNA is used in medical treatments.
I was very impressed by her. Know nothing about her. I had never seen her before, but certainly you could put her up and let her have a voice.
Without a change in the trajectory of the pandemic, the warnings about where it's all headed are increasingly grim. The American Association of Medical Colleges warns that the death toll is likely to reach the multiple hundreds of thousands. Donna.
Jackson in Washington, thanks. The governor of Oregon says after discussions with Vice President Mike Pence, the White House has agreed to withdraw federal agents from Portland. She says they'll begin leaving the city tomorrow. The governor says the federal agents, dressed in camouflage and with no ID, have acted as an occupying force and brought violence. President Trump sent them to the city to protect a federal courthouse. Since the death of George Floyd, there have been nightly protests in downtown Portland, and federal agents have been heavily criticized for their tactics. Though the governor says they're now leaving, President Trump said today the remaining agents will not leave until local authorities have, as he says, secured the city. In this country, tomorrow, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his top aide will testify before the House of Commons Finance Committee. The Ethics Commissioner is also investigating the Prime Minister and Finance Minister Bill Morneau for possible violations of conflict of interest rules. They've admitted they did not recuse themselves from cabinet discussions about a multi-million-dollar student grant program, even though they both had personal connections to the We charity. Mike Couteur will be among those watching. Mike, the opposition is going to pounce on the Prime Minister. What can we expect?
Donna, a senior government source tells Global News the Prime Minister's biggest regret is his family has been dragged into this. We're also being told Trudeau will again apologize for not recusing himself from the cabinet decision to give We Charity the nearly $1 billion contract. That source also says 100% of the story is already public, and Justin Trudeau is appearing so the focus can get back to helping youth in the country. But opposition MPs are more focused on Trudeau.
He should come tomorrow and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, for once.
And if opposition MPs think Trudeau hasn't done that, Conservative Pierre Poilievre says they'll drag the Prime Minister back before the committee and do it all over again. Now, following testimony by the Kielburger brothers, the co-founders of the We Charity, Conservatives have new questions about the auxiliary expenses paid out by the charity to Trudeau's family members for a number of appearances.
Within weeks of one of these trips, the government engages the We organization to deliver a program worth $500 million.
Why did he choose to help his close friends instead of helping students who are in need of some supports?
Now, as much as the Prime Minister hopes his appearance will turn the focus back to the pandemic response, it won't turn down the heat on Trudeau. He still has to answer questions from the Ethics Commissioner, who is investigating his role in the government's decision to choose We Charity. Donna?
Okay, Mike Couteur, thanks. 4 of the world's biggest bosses facing accusations. Coming up, do tech giants hold too much power? Plus, an update on the case of the stolen teddy bear in Vancouver. This is the fiery aftermath of a freight train derailment in Arizona. It caused a 4-kilometer bridge to partially collapse. The train was carrying wood and oil when it jumped the tracks and burst into flames this morning. No crew members were hurt. 4 of the world's wealthiest and most influential men faced a reckoning in Washington today. They head the 4 big tech companies that dominate our lives.
But I recognize that there are concerns about the size and power of tech companies. Our services are about connection, and our business model is advertising, and we face intense competition in both.
Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and the men who run Amazon, Apple, and Google were grilled virtually by a congressional subcommittee. Together, they're worth about $5 trillion, and there are lots of questions about their business practices and influence. Their companies are under an antitrust microscope, looking at the monopolies they've created, their competition tactics, and how they utilize user data.
Because these companies are so central to our modern life, their business practices and decisions have an outsized effect on our economy and our democracy. Any single action by one of these companies can affect hundreds of millions of us in profound and lasting ways.
It was the first time Amazon's Jeff Bezos faced Congress. He's the world's wealthiest man, and he was asked about how Amazon undercuts competitors and its own third-party vendors with predatory practices.
In 2013, it was reported that you instructed Amazon employees to approach discussions with certain business partners, and I quote, the way a cheetah would pursue a sickly gazelle. Is the Gazelle Project still in place, and does Amazon pursue similar predatory campaigns in other parts of its business?
I cannot comment on that because I don't remember it.
Multiple times, the CEOs evaded questions, claiming not to know specifics about the documents or the interactions they were asked about. Critics say they damaged the economy by killing off smaller businesses and strangling competition, and that government regulation is required. A report on the investigation is due to be released in the fall. Still ahead, a sinkhole in China swallows 2 people. Well, how's this for being in the wrong place at the wrong time? 2 pedestrians in China were swallowed up by a huge sinkhole when the sidewalk suddenly collapsed. Both survived. They have minor injuries. Authorities believe recent torrential rains caused the sidewalk to give way. There's growing concern Hong Kong may be on the verge of a new outbreak of COVID-19. Hong Kong is struggling with a surge in new cases. Nearly all of them are the result of community transmission. Leader Carrie Lam warns it may cause hospitals to collapse. Strict new measures are put in place to help stop the spread of the virus, and Lam is urging the public to follow the rules. Gatherings are now limited to 2 people. Restaurants are no longer allowed to offer dine-in services, and residents must wear a mask when they leave home. Hong Kong, which had a relatively low number of cases, is now regularly reporting over 100 new infections per day. The Hajj has begun in Saudi Arabia, and it looks very different this year. Strict limits have been put on the number of pilgrims allowed into the holy city of Mecca. Only 10,000 worshippers are permitted, and they must wear masks, move in groups of no more than 20, and maintain physical distance. The Hajj normally attracts up to 2 million Muslims from around the world. Saudi Arabia has reported more than 272,000 cases of COVID-19. Recruiting rovers next, training dogs to lead the pandemic by the nose.
You're watching Global National.
No matter where you are, a part of me will always be with you forever.
Those are the words Mara Soriano wanted to hear again. Her bear, with a recording of her mother's voice, was stolen last week in Vancouver while she was moving, and now it's been returned. Her mother, Marilyn, passed away from cancer last year, so the bear was very precious. And yesterday, a man returned it to her safe and sound.
I feel amazing. I just feel so happy to have her back, and not only that, it just is incredible to feel the love and kindness and compassion from everyone who was involved with the story, and I'm speechless.
News of the theft spread on social media. Thousands retweeted it, and Vancouver-born actor Ryan Reynolds offered a $5,000 reward for the bear. Mara says that money has been sent to the person who returned the bear, and she's extended an invitation to Reynolds. He's invited to her wedding, where the bear might be the ring bearer. Some other beloved animals are proving to be a valuable tool in the fight against COVID-19. A new study suggests that dogs are able to sniff out the new coronavirus with remarkable accuracy and very little training. Jeff Semple went to see a man about a dog.
Canine's keen sense of smell has helped to sniff out illegal drugs, explosives, even missing people. And now this pack is also lending a paw in the fight against an invisible threat.
When the pandemic was coming to Germany, we were thinking, could we actually help with helping with dogs?
This German researcher and his team trained 8 military dogs to smell saliva from people with COVID-19. They tested more than 1,000 samples, both healthy and infected, and the pups picked correctly 94% of the time after just 1 week of training.
We were also really amazed how fast these dogs learn.
The scent receptors in this schnoz are up to 10,000 times better than ours. The four-legged friends have previously been trained to detect bacteria and a dozen human diseases, including malaria and diabetes.
The thing what dogs don't smell is the virus, right? So they smell what the virus does to our body.
Let's go.
Glenn Ferguson's dogs have conducted cancer screening for nearly 40,000 firefighters in Canada and the United States by smelling their breath samples.
I think, as far as the utility for dogs with COVID, testing for COVID-19 is that it can be done quickly.
Current COVID-19 tests require a throat or nasal swab and can sometimes take several days to produce a result. These dogs sniffed out the virus in seconds.
So to have a dog in front of a school or in an airport or a bus or a train station certainly makes a lot of sense.
Chile is planning to do just that, training its police dogs to sniff for COVID-19 in busy public spaces, though some, like this veterinary professor, worry they're putting the pups at risk.
And there's only a few cases, but the evidence is strong enough to say that pets are infectable, and cats likely more so than dogs.
And it's unclear whether dogs could pick up the scent in a passerby or someone with mild symptoms. The German study used samples from COVID-19 patients who'd been hospitalized. But the pooch potential begs further study. This small group alone could screen more than 4,000 people in a single day. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
And that's Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with the new $2 coin, or pictures of it anyway. It pays tribute to the late Haida artist Bill Reid. The Mint rolled out this toonie on what would have been his 100th birthday. It features a grizzly bear, a central figure in Reid's groundbreaking work. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.